Before air conditioning existed, people in some of the hottest climates on Earth kept their homes genuinely cool without a single electrical device. The methods they used were not primitive guesses. They were centuries of figuring out exactly how heat moves, and some work better than anything most people try today when the AC bill spikes. The core principle behind almost every old cooling method is the same one, and once you understand it, everything else starts to make sense. Heat does not just float randomly through a house. It follows a predictable path. During the day, it enters through windows, walls, and the roof, accumulates inside, and radiates from every surface it has touched. At night, the outdoor temperature drops significantly in most climates, but most people keep their windows shut out of habit, which traps the built-up heat inside and starts the next day at a higher baseline than necessary. The forgotten method is cross-ventilation combined with strategic window management, and it was the entire basis of how homes were designed and used in warm climates for centuries before mechanical cooling existed. The approach works in two phases, one for the day and one for the night, and doing only one without the other cuts the effectiveness roughly in half. During the day, the goal is to block heat from entering in the first place rather than trying to remove it once it is already inside. Close windows on the side of the house that faces the sun, particularly south and west facing windows in the northern hemisphere, since these receive direct sunlight during the hottest hours of the afternoon. If you have curtains, draw them on those windows. What you are trying to do is keep the glass from acting as a collector that heats the air near it and radiates that heat into the room. A single west-facing window, receiving full afternoon sun, can raise the temperature of the room it is in by several degrees on its own, and blocking that window during peak hours prevents that heat from ever entering the indoor air. On the shaded side of the house, typically north and east-facing windows in the morning, leave those open during the cooler parts of the day to allow any breeze to move through. This is the beginning of cross-ventilation, the idea that air needs an entry point and an exit point to actually move through a space rather than just sitting in it. A window opened on only one side of a room creates very little airflow. Two windows on opposite sides of the room or the house, with one lower and one higher if possible, create a draft that pulls cooler air in and pushes warmer air out, since warm air rises and will naturally move toward higher exit points. Now here is where the $7 part comes in, because so far this has cost nothing. There are two inexpensive physical additions that old households used to dramatically amplify the effect of cross-ventilation, and both of them still work just as well today. The first is a wet sheet or cloth hung in front of an open window on the breezy side of the house. As air passes through damp fabric, it picks up moisture and cools through a process called evaporative cooling, the same principle that makes sweat useful as a cooling mechanism for the human body. The incoming air drops several degrees in temperature as it moves through the wet fabric before entering the room. In dry climates, this effect is pronounced enough that the room can feel noticeably cooler within minutes of setting it up. In very humid climates, the effect is reduced since humid air cannot absorb as much additional moisture, but even there, any reduction helps on a hot day. A bucket, a piece of cotton sheeting or a large towel, and a hook or rod to hang it from are all that is required, and the total cost is essentially zero if you already have fabric at home, or a few dollars if you need to pick something up. The second addition is a shallow container of water placed in front of a fan, which applies the same evaporative principle in a more controlled way for rooms where window placement makes natural cross-ventilation difficult. A wide, shallow pan or tray filled with cold water, ideally with some ice added if you have it, placed directly in front of a small fan, produces air that is measurably cooler than the fan would produce alone. This is sometimes called a swamp cooler in its more elaborate commercial form, but the home version with a bowl and a fan achieves the same basic result for a few dollars total in materials, with the fan itself being the only electrical component involved. A basic box fan or small desk fan costs between $7 and $15 new, and even less second-hand, which is where the $7 figure in the title comes from for the core setup. The night phase is where the real payoff happens, and it is the part most people skip without realizing how much it matters. Once the outdoor temperature drops below the indoor temperature, which in most climates happens between 10 at night and midnight in summer, the entire strategy reverses. Open every window in the house, ideally on both sides to create a through draft, and if you have a ceiling fan, run it counterclockwise to push air downward, since most ceiling fans default to a clockwise direction that is better suited to winter heating. The goal at this point is to flush as much of the heat accumulated during the day out of the house as quickly as possible, bringing the indoor temperature as close to the outdoor nighttime temperature as you can before the sun comes up and the cycle starts again. Houses that are well cross-ventilated overnight often start the next day 5 to 10 degrees cooler indoors than houses that remained closed up the night before, even if both houses received identical sun exposure during the previous day. That lower starting baseline means the heat that enters on the second day takes longer to accumulate to uncomfortable levels, which means the method compounds on itself over consecutive days of use. There is one more layer worth adding here that old builders understood intuitively, even without the science to explain it. The materials a home is built from matter as much as the ventilation strategy. Dense materials like brick, stone, tile, and concrete absorb heat slowly during the day and release it slowly at night, acting as a buffer that delays how quickly indoor temperatures rise. This is called thermal mass, and it is the reason an old stone farmhouse stays cool well into the afternoon even on a very hot day, while a modern light-framed house heats up within an hour or two of the sun hitting it. If you have tile floors, a brick fireplace surround, or concrete walls in any part of your home, those surfaces are already doing this work passively. Keeping them shaded during the day and allowing cool night air to pass over them overnight resets their temperature and gives them more buffering capacity for the next day. One thing worth knowing about the history here, because this did not come from guesswork. Vernacular architecture, meaning the traditional building styles that developed in specific regions before industrialized construction, almost universally incorporated these principles in hot climates. Traditional homes in the American Southwest used thick adobe walls that absorbed heat slowly during the day and released it gradually overnight. Houses in the American South were built with wide covered porches and high ceilings specifically to shade walls and allow heat to rise and exit above living level. Persian and Middle Eastern architecture developed wind catchers, tall towers that captured prevailing breezes at height and directed them downward through the house, passing over water channels to cool the air before it reached the living spaces. None of these were decorative choices. They were the result of generations of direct experience with how to keep a structure livable in extreme heat without any mechanical assistance whatsoever. A point worth raising that often gets overlooked is the role of the attic in how hot a house gets during summer. In most homes, the attic sits between the roof and the living space, and on a hot sunny day, an unventilated attic can reach temperatures well above 150 degrees. That superheated air then radiates downward through the ceiling into the rooms below, raising the indoor temperature independently of any windows or walls. Old farmhouses typically had large attic vents on both gable ends of the roof to allow cross-ventilation in the attic itself, which prevented that heat from building up in the first place. If your attic has vents that are blocked by insulation or debris, clearing them costs nothing and can reduce how fast your top floor rooms heat up considerably. If you try this starting tonight, the most important single step, if you do only one thing, is to open your windows from opposite sides of the house after 10 at night and let the house breathe until an hour or so before dawn. That overnight flush alone will give you a measurable difference in how the house feels by morning, and it costs nothing beyond remembering to do it. The next video covers what to do when a room has only one window and cross-ventilation is not physically possible, since that situation needs a slightly different approach, and the fix involves something most people walk past in the hardware store without realizing what it can do. Stay subscribed for that one. Let me know in the comments which climate you are in and whether your nights cool down significantly, because the answer to that question changes which part of this method will make the biggest difference for your specific situation.